as a World War II bomber on the USS Block Island. Designed by Grumman, that company made some incredibly rugged airplanes for the United States Navy, including the F-4F Wildcat, the F-6F Hellcat, after World War II, the F-8F Bearcat, the F-7F Tigercat, and continuing in that tradition, one of our generation's most famous airplanes, the F-14 Tomcat, which served for over about 32 years with the United States Navy and was retired back on September 22nd. Larger and making them too big to be on the front of an airplane, they actually added rows of cylinders behind that first row. So typically, the aircraft would have 7 or 9 cylinders, and if they needed to get more horsepower, they would put a second row of 7 or 9 cylinders behind it. In this case, 7 cylinders times 2 rows, 14 cylinders, giving it 1,700 horsepower. It was known as the Avenger, but it was actually had 2 different naval designations. One was the TBM, the other was the TBF. Grumman was the TBF, the designer, but it was also built under license by General Motors. Now, I'm going to fade the mic down, let's listen to the sound of the Well, there you hear the sound of a radial engine. It is an amazing sound, and you'll hear a different sound of a piston engine a little bit later on, I believe, when we have a P-51 Mustang as part of the United States Air Force and assist another company in setting up a production line for the same aircraft. So the Grumman folks went to General Motors and said, okay, here's how to build an Avenger, and they helped them set up production lines. So the need for more and more Avengers could be met. They used multiple manufacturers. Maximum speed, 270 miles per hour. Here comes the Avenger. It replaced the Douglas TBM Devastator as the Navy's torpedo bomber in the Pacific. The Grumman Avenger has the strength and power to do the job. But as I mentioned, they had to pass off some of the manufacturing to General Motors because Grumman was very, very busy producing single-engine fighters, Wildcats and Bearcats. Simmons flying the airplane today. And you can learn about the Heritage Flight Foundation at heritageflightfoundation.org. They're dedicated to educating the public by preserving aviation history, offering static displays, and providing hands-on experience in the air through year-round operations of Warbird Experience. currently hangared at Westerly. They've got a North American AT-6G Texan and the Grumman Avenger you see here today. You're also hearing a little bit of sound from the propeller tips going supersonic at about 2,700 RPM or so. We heard that a little bit on takeoff. There you heard a little bit of that mini sonic boom from the propeller tips. The armament on board the TBM Avenger, 350 caliber machine guns, 2 fixed forward firing, and 1 was in a rear turret, and a 30 caliber machine gun in a ventral position down underneath, and it could carry up to 2,000 pounds of bombs or 1 torpedo in an internal bomb bay. It's 54 feet wings. It's 54-foot wingspan. Helps give it the lift. It's 40 feet long. It's 16.5 feet high. While flying in combat in the Pacific Theater in World War II. There were 9,000. Now I'm going to throw out a number here that somebody will say, no, that's incorrect. Because depending on whose history book you read, production numbers of aircraft vary. There are very few totally agreeing numbers on production of different aircraft during World War II. But one of my sources says that there were 9,839 Avengers built in total. Oh no, that's incorrect. Well, then you're right, Ken. That's right. It was also flown by the Royal Navy. They called it the Tarpon. It was used with great effect as an anti-submarine warfare aircraft. They destroyed or shared in the destruction of 42 German U-boats. They used the first high-velocity aircraft rockets in January of 1944. And in the Battle of Midway, early in 1942, actually in June of 1942, 6 TBM Avengers saw action and only 1 returned. Typically with a crew of 3 members, as I recall. 3 seats. And a top speed of 270 miles per hour up at altitude. As you saw, the TBM Avenger had its wingfold mechanism. That wingfold design was introduced by the Grumman Corporation on the TBM model and was later employed on the F-4, F-Wildcat, and the Hellcat models. And Leroy Drummond designed the company's first torpedo bomber, the heaviest single-engine aircraft in World War II. By 1943, Drummond began to phase out the TBM models, and Eastern Aircraft Division of General Motors started that production. And interestingly, they got you look at that landing gear, and there was a big challenge in designing aircraft that were going to land on aircraft carriers, because they didn't do so much of a landing as they did a controlled crash, because they had to land these aircraft in about 400 feet of carrier deck. And they would have a tail hook that would come down on the back and catch one of 4 steel cables stretched across the deck of a carrier. I don't know if they had 4 back then, but that's what they have now on aircraft carriers to stop the Hornets and the Super Hornets and the Hawkeyes and the other aircraft that are involved with carrier operations. But they had to have landing gear which were extremely rugged. And the larger the engines, in this case the 1700 horsepower Wright engine that is on, the Wright engine on the aircraft, they had bigger and bigger propellers, and they had to have longer landing gear and stronger landing gear in order to keep the propeller tips from striking the deck during those very strong landings. As I mentioned, in June of 1943, Junior President George Bush was the youngest, was shot down in his Avenger. He was the youngest naval aviator in history at the time. And in September of 1944, he was shot down then. And then another famous Avenger aviator was Paul Newman, who flew as a rear gunner. Saddled with the dangerous job of pushing through enemy fighter protection, dodging a barrage of gunfire, and releasing a torpedo at can't-miss range, the Avenger was well-armed and well-armored. By the end of the war, Avengers had sunk over 60 enemy ships, participated in the destruction of the world's largest battleship, the Yamato. Avengers played a major role in the Allied victory during World War II. And only 42 are still airworthy today.
What's today? Saturday what?
If you'd like to know more about them, I'll mention their website again. It's www.heritageFlightFoundation.org for donation information.